We're hitting the back step at some point. We've been able to expose his back. And maybe, and you know, for some of you guys that were still messing this up a little bit, just remember, you know, I'm stuffing the head. And when I step, I should step farther enough that when my knee touches the mat, at least when I do it, my knee is touching the mat a little bit closer to the middle of his back, right? So if I stuff his head and my knee drops like somewhere over here, now when I do this, it's like, you're a little bit like off balance, right? So, you know, don't be afraid to exaggerate that step past the head, right? You know, what's the worst that happens? That you don't take it and you end up like in some Kimura type position, right? So I stuff, I'm stepping past his head, boom. This is different than wrestling, right? I'm not doing this. I'm not doing like go. You know, by that time, he flattens out, right? There's no back exposure, right? So when I hit a back step, it's to beat him to the punch before he can flatten out, right? So, boom. I push into him, boom, I expose his back. Maybe I expose it like this, maybe I expose it like this. Whatever the case may be, the focus should be the chest to back, right? So if I had to get that Kimura grip, drive forward, shift my body down, that's what you gotta do. But it should be chest to back, somewhat ear to ear. Make sense? Now, when I take the back, I'm not gonna go ahead and just be like, oh, here it is, and step over, right? One little off balance, and I face plant on that side, right? So, you know, my right elbow is probably inside the thigh of my right leg. My left knee is probably going to touch that top hip. And then I'll go ahead and, you know, windshield wipe that shin behind his back. If you look here, I got his back still off the mat, pretty much very close to back exposure for me to take his back, right? So, you know, depending on what he's doing with this leg, you know, it's not as easy as just throwing your leg over to get a hook. But, you know, you should be able to kind of snake your foot right through that hip line, right? So now I got a foot over the hip. I'm still in a seated position, right? And this is where a lot of times I tell people, like, you got to figure out where you're strong, right? So, you know, I can right away make this more of a attacking the shoulder line type thing. Maybe I attack arm bars, triangles, or I can very well just take the back, right? So this is where, like in the training room, if you're better at one than the other and you still need to develop it, stick with the thing that you're working on, right? Right now, I'll show a little bit of everything. This is advanced class, but ultimately, you got to choose the best route for your style, right? So for me, I tend to try to stay on the back and at least try to go like back triangle. So if I was trying to take the back, it could be done many different ways. If I was just trying to force him to the non-choking side, force him to the opposite side, my left foot will probably like hook like the outside of his hips, like something like this. And then my right foot will probably just be stepping on the ankle. So I'm going to go ahead and play it like this. So originally when I land, I generally will have a 2-on-1, if I did this exact sequence, on the bottom arm. All right, notice that. Preferred top arm, right? I want this, right? But if I was here, I could definitely, you know, release one, get control of both, and get two hands on that top arm, right? So I have a 2-on-1. You know, notice my right arm is extended. My right elbow should be blocking this shoulder, right? Many times I've seen people do this, they think they got it, and the dude just unravels himself, right? So I get two hands on that top arm. My right elbow should be pulling back on that shoulder. Now, once I get this 2-on-1, my bottom hand will stay, right? My cross grip, so it would be my left hand controlling his right. Once I free this hand, I mean, everything pretty much depends on what he's going to do. A lot of times people they block like this, or sometimes they'll try to grab your wrist right away. Depends on what they do. Ideally, the scenario, if they grab my wrist, I do a little bit of risk taking here, right? Because he can control my hand in front of his body. Very hard for him to control if I pull behind his back. What's the problem with that? The turn, right? So as long as you're aware of that, right? I can be here. The moment he grabs my wrist, I can attempt maybe to re-grab for sure. But a lot of times you'll see me kind of like snatch my hand away. I expect him to try to run, grab the shoulder, bring my elbow back, snatch the wrist, right? Perfect world, that's how it would look like. But ideally, once we look to use this pulling the hand behind the back, I better be ready for him to try to essentially try to turn, right? So control the shoulder if you can. Maybe then at that point you can grab the wrist. This is my control here, right? That straight jacket control. And when I do this, like I tend to keep my left hand kind of like glued to his stomach and my right hand extended in front of his face. right? This is just something I like to do. I call it Kia, like karate, like Kia, right? And what I'm doing here is I want to keep his hands separated at the same time while controlling the shoulder, right? So if I ask Andrew to try to hand fight me here, right, this would be very hard for him to relinquish his grip back, right? So once I'm here, this is where, my feet start to do some work. My left foot, a lot of times, if it's hooking the thigh, bring your knee up. If it's doing something like this, you can just push on your own ankle. See that? His shoulder drops a little, whoop, and it makes it a little bit easier for me to whip that leg around. Notice my elbow inside my thigh. That looks a lot different if I'm doing like this, right? And like I barely can get over his shoulder. This is more like, okay, maybe 2-on-1 rear naked choke, right? So this is how you kind of gauge what your attacks are in line. Like if I'm pretty close ear to ear, man, I'm probably gonna like choke. If something happened where his head was like this low, man, we're attacking, that upper body. Maybe triangles, arm bars, and stuff like that. All right, so 2-on-1, straight jacket control, Kia. My leg can hook over like this, and I can just go straight for that rear naked choke. I can look to push the head low, throw my leg over, start looking for those back triangles, arm bar setups. But ideally, this is probably going to be one of the more stronger places to be. Boom, in that back triangle, looking to attack that arm, and then we finish from there. All right, so what's the drill? We're going to end up here, and we're just going to look for some offense, right? This is our chance to explore, especially if you're kind of new to the school. Boom, we're just getting here, entering the back. Maybe at this point, I pull my bottom leg out, and now I can use my feet, separate his hands, still ultimately hit that back triangle, right? So get into that position, decide whether you're going to attack the shoulder line, you're going to attack the back, and then once we're done with that, next few minutes, we're going to start going live. Let's go. Ready, 1, 2.